Hi, friends. My name's Marty Alajanian. Believe it or not, after the last train wreck, they've asked me back to do another devotional. It's kind of a miracle. As you may remember or know from seeing me on at 8:30, I'm the keyboardist in the 8:30 contemporary services. I have some of my friends lurking behind me. And today, in the spirit of Father's Day run-up week, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite dads in the entire Bible, Zacharias. I have some props today. I think it's going to reinforce the verse and the readings. But specifically, the verse is Luke. Sorry, I have some screens here. I'm going to cheat. Luke chapter 1, verses 57 to 80. I know that sounds like a lot to read. It's riveting. It will go by so quickly. And I'm actually going to give you a little extra homework because I'm going to tie in Luke 1, 15 to 19, because I think it's a key part of the entire reading and ties into Father's Day really well. It also ties into one of my favorite comedians of all time, the great Rodney Dangerfield. Now, for those of you of a certain age, no explanation needed. For those of you who are a little younger, Rodney Dangerfield was filling arenas in the late 70s and 80s. He produced an album. It went gold. I still have my copy. I treasure it. I saw him at the Providence Civic Center. He was unbelievable. Kind of looks like a middle-aged, well, young now to me, middle-aged guy. And you say, what were high school and college kids filling arenas for this guy? But he was in a little movie called Caddyshack, which kind of made him famous. Did some other movies after that, and was just a legendary comedian. What does any of this have to do with Luke? I'm so glad you asked, because like Rodney Dangerfield, Luke, and specifically Zacharias, gets no respect. Let's start with his name. So depending on your Bible, I have some additional props. He's called Zacharias, or Zach. We're going to call him Zach. Some Bibles call him Zechariah. Some Bibles call him Zechariah. I'm afraid to do any more research because I'm going to find a fourth name. The guy gets no respect at all, like most dads. Similarly, my last name is Alajanian, but I've received Allegheny. I've received Elijahwan. I wish I were related to Akeem Elijahwan, but I'm not. So names and the butchering of names shows no respect, and something that Zacharias and I have in common. We have a few things in common. When the angel Gabriel came down to talk to Zach about the fact that at his advanced age, we have that in common too, he was going to become a dad again. Wow. So what does Zacharias do? In typical Middle Eastern fashion, we have that in common too. He laughs and says, "Get out of town," basically. I'll give you the exact line. In Luke 1:18, Zach asks the angel Gabriel, how can you even ask the angel Gabriel a question? That's pretty major temerity on his part, but okay. How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and now this part's going to get him in trouble. I'm not giving him any sympathy for this part. And my wife is well along in years. Not a good move, Zach. So the angel Gabriel doesn't get too upset. It kind of reminds me of my grandfather. He had no temper at all, but he would lay down the lumber sometimes. Says, "I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. What don't you understand? I've been sent to speak to you and tell you of this good news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens because you didn't believe my words, which will come true," like there was any doubt about that, "at their appointed time." So Zacharias gets struck, can't talk anymore until the day that, well, we think a little time afterwards that John the Baptist is actually born, and then he invents the first iPad. No, I'm kidding. But there is a verse that talks about him writing John's name on a tablet. It's the iPad tablet joke. Where Luke 62:63 says, "Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, 'His name is John.'" So we have shortly thereafter that period ending where he can now regain his speech, and he goes on to father John, who is, of course, the cousin of Christ, and John lays the foundation for the coming of Christ and Christ's ascension, and so many great verses associated with John. John says that I have to decline, so he will rise. In typical fatherly fashion, we get no respect. We don't want the spotlight. Everyone else should do well. Kidding a bit, dads aren't always that humble. But the whole continuum is just so critical to me and so impressive to me, and reminds me of how dads, I know my kids and my wife would love me to be mute sometimes and not talk as much. They're always accusing me of talking way too much, like in this devotional. So hopefully I won't be struck by the angel Gabriel or anybody else. But I think there's lots of great themes there that we could all learn. All the dads could learn about Zach, and the fact that maybe Zach could be a little more faithful, a little more believing. When the angel Gabriel comes to visit you, don't laugh, don't be a wise guy, accept it on sort of face value. But the angel, Zechariah, hung in there with John, raised him, supported him throughout, knew he had something very, very special at that point. I think it's pretty safe to say Zacharias' faith was about 150% rock solid from that point on, which is another thing that dads could certainly learn to embrace and adopt. But I think from a dad's standpoint, as the lead up comes to Father's Day, we should all tip the hat to Zacharias, show him some respect. Don't treat him like Rodney Dangerfield. Settle on one name, and go back to Luke and just really embrace and digest these verses, because they're some of my favorites in the New Testament. Thank you all. I hope you have a great week.